Phoenix Rising: The Return of the Gold Standard, written by Anthony Migchels on January 28, 2012. What has been in the cards for decades is now fully on the agenda: the return of the gold standard. Gold as currency is a weapon. It is a wealth transfer to those holding the gold and will precipitate a massive deflation. The ensuing chaos will help usher in their coveted New World Order and world currency. The number of stories pertaining to gold as currency has seen a major peak recently. This week alone, it was reported that India will pay Iran in gold for their oil imports. In another development, China, Japan, Russia, France, and a number of Arab states will pay each other with a basket of currencies, including gold. Yet another story was Robert Zoellick, who has been promoting a gold standard for years, admitting the demise of the dollar reflects changing balance of power in the world. These stories are framed as resistance against the dollar hegemony, and of course, that is a part of the story. Another dialectic: United States against the rest of the world. But, were these nations really acting independently, they would barter amongst each other, based on current account bookkeeping and basically crossing off all mutually outstanding debt. That would save them massive sums of currency and associated capital costs. They would need hard currency only to settle negative balances. Of course, when these developments run their course, it would have a devastating effect on the dollar, as it would mean trillions of dollars would be repatriated from overseas as they are no longer used to finance international trade. It helps the money power in her plan to bring the United States down a few notches, indispensable in her drive to world government. But the loss of importance of the dollar is only part of the story, because the dollar is the only current vehicle the money power uses to rule international finance. It doesn't care for the vehicle itself, as long as it has a suitable successor. And in the United States itself, there also is a strong drive towards gold as currency. The onslaught by Austrian economics and the alternative media comes to mind, and Ron Paul, of course. He openly calls for gold as currency. In this respect, he clearly is the ultimate internationalist candidate. This contrasts sharply with his patriotic, quote, constitutionalism, unquote. But when he must choose between the Constitution and the monetary, it is clear what his priorities are. Ron Paul lies about constitutional money, saying the Constitution says we should have gold and/or silver as currency. But it doesn't. It says we may have gold as currency, but other units are also allowed. This little detail is really very telling. It is typical of the money power to change agents. They hide behind a sympathetic and credible theme, meanwhile actively supporting the implementation of a worse and more important agenda. And control of the money supply is all important, to the money power anyway. It also reminds us of how internationally the money power operates. We must not allow our national priorities to obscure the international context. Austerity and deflation. A gold standard would be an unmitigated disaster. It will lead to excruciating deflation. Deflation is a horror for debtors, who see their debts and the interest they pay over them grow worse in real terms. And since everybody is complaining of debt so much, we might reconsider making it worse with deflation. Winston Churchill, who was involved in the reinstatement of the gold standard in Britain in the 1920s, testified to the House of Commons in 1935, when the deflation of the Great Depression had made gold untenable. Quote, "Look at the enormous increased volume of commodities which have to be created in order to pay off the same mortgage debt or loan. Minor fluctuation might well be ignored, but I say quite seriously that this monetary convulsion has reached a new pitch where I am persuaded the producers of new wealth will not tolerate indefinitely so hideous an oppression. I therefore point to this evil, and to the search for the methods of remedying it, as the first, second, and third of all the problems which should command and rivet our thoughts." Unquote. Deflation destroys the economy because people have an incentive to hoard cash, instead of using it for production and consumption. The banking fraternity is well aware of the disastrous deflation that gold promotes. For instance, the protocols say in their financial program, Protocol 20, quote, "You are aware that the gold standard has been the ruin of the states which adopted it, for it has not been able to satisfy the demands for money. The more so we have removed gold from circulation as far as possible." Unquote. This quote also confirms that they are able, willing, and known to withhold vast amounts of gold from the market. So the idea that gold is a safe bet because it cannot be printed does not stand. The volume can be manipulated because most of it is in the hands of the money power, who can inflate and deflate at will. The social and economic havoc it created through the Great Depression led to the rise of fascism. It is quite likely that weaponized gold is being used for similar purposes this time. And of course, we should also consider the one-off wealth transfer that reinstating gold as currency brings. Its price would have to go up maybe 10 or 20-fold to replace all the fiat currency in the world. The 99% having no gold will, as usual, be holding the bag. Conclusion. Far from a solution, the coming gold standard is a logical next step in the money power's plan of destabilization and order out of chaos. We will have a long and painful depression, and although it is not certain that gold will completely replace paper, it is obvious that we will know scarce money and contraction for years to come. The austerity and deflation that the money power's agents in the International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements, and central banks are promoting will set the stage for major upheaval and the usual problem-reaction-solution, dialectically driven march to world government. Our answer must be to have the government reclaim the monopoly it has surrendered to a private central banking cartel. But the goal is not to end the Fed. The goal is better money. Government must print debt-free money, preferably social credit. Since this is not going to happen anytime soon, we should build free market currencies, which can actively compete with national currencies. Ellen Brown's public banking is another approach in the populist spirit. And we should take our money out of the banks, of course. Why should we patronize a business that is enslaving us with credit by bookkeeping, slapping interest on it, creating booms and busts, and trillions worth of bailouts?